So with that said, brother, welcome, brother Jahmil, to the Pachyderm Podcast.
Appreciate it, man. It's good to see you.
Let our folks know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Where do I start, man? Long story short,
ain't no rush.
Yeah, I grew up in a household of praying women. My grandmother spent a lot of time in the church, and had us in the church all the time. My mother and my father also were very devoted Christians and in the church in various capacities. And so my upbringing was very much so like an introductory in spirituality and God. And so I feel like that's sort of my foundation for sure. Grew up in a church in West Oakland. And, my upbringing was very much so like to be quite honest, I had no knowledge of a lot of things that were going on outside of my house. So a lot of the structural stuff we talk about, violence, just a lot of stuff that we know is going on in Oakland. I didn't really have a lot of knowledge of it because my parents and my family kept me very insulated. So they very much so value education. So I always had some type of homework project, reading, book report, or something to do, right? I was involved in sports a lot, so I played hoop. And that was the thing that I think taught me a lot about just working with other people and also just gaining confidence. I think particularly I'm short, so I play point guard a lot. And so I think as a point guard, I needed to learn a lot about in order to be a point guard, I think you got to come with a certain type of aura, right? You already got to have a certain type of confidence. And I felt like basketball sort of allowed me to grow into that and to build that confidence. And then that sort of spiritual foundation helped me to have, to add to that confidence of just having faith. And so I think my entire life has been about faith and confidence. Honestly, it's what has allowed me to get through a lot of the stuff that for me didn't feel when I was in situations where I didn't know how I was going to make it out of. I relied on my faith and my confidence, So I grew up in the Laurel district of Oakland, actually all over Oakland. I went to Jubilee West as a kid, West Oakland, went to schools in the Laurel district. And then around middle school, my family decided they wanted to buy a house and wanted to provide a better living situation. And so ended up moving out to Tracy area, which is everybody sort of migrated and has migrated toward Tracy, Stockton, Antioch. And so I went to high school out in Tracy. And that was a mind fuck to be honest with you. Just, being a Black male in an environment, particularly a Black male in an environment that was predominantly white, predominantly very country white, not just liberal white, not Oakland white, but white. I
was about to say that those that don't know the dynamics, we're talking Mars and Earth,
yes.
completely different setup.
Completely different setup. And so I always felt like I was the not the black sheep, but I was always just different. But it was cool because there were other Black people from Oakland, from San Jose, from the Bay, who were out there as well. So we all had a very tight-knit Black community. Even my first introduction to Juneteenth was Tracy. It wasn't even Oakland. It wasn't even there was a very tight-knit Black community in Tracy, which I appreciated. And from that experience, just growing up in Tracy and just kind of experiencing sort of being the only Black person in the gifted and talented education classes. And, I was a part of this academic program in high school called International Baccalaureate, where we basically took the same exams that folks in Japan and Europe and all across the world were taking, kind of like AP, but just another form of AP. Sort of being the only Black person in that program, I felt I wanted to be in a completely, I didn't want to feel like the minority all the time. So I knew off the bat I wanted to go to HBCU. So I ended up going to Morehouse after high school, spending some time in Atlanta for a couple of years. And that was a great experience, bro. And so it's a lot of my growth as a man, as a person, as a professional, and also just spiritually, I think came from that period of my life in Atlanta. Because, Atlanta is it's all about just Black excellence and just Black upward mobility and And it's also about just like community, you know what I'm saying? And I felt that when I came. And so my whole life has just kind of like been like me just kind of figuring it out and just going with the wind. Like I don't ever have like a plan in my head of like what I'm doing next. I pray very often. I listen. And when I'm given the answers, I just move. Like that's just kind of how I've been operating, how things have kind of worked out for me. So I'll say long story short, I'll stop it there. If you have like, obviously I can go on and on, but right now it's been a whirlwind. It's just kind of like I said, just kind of going and choosing to always choose like to work with and be amongst my people. Like that's always been something that I cared about. And so whatever I wanted, whatever path I chose to go down, regardless of like I did urban planning when I first came out of college. I did a little bit of community organizing. I did youth development, public health, and now I'm in medicine. And if you look down every single path that I've taken, it's always been about like uplifting my people and working in partnership with Black people. And so, and I'm very unapologetic about that. I take pride in that. And I think that that's something that has continued to fuel me and drive me.
Brother, that's why I admire you so much, because I understand it's not always easy keeping your identity in certain fields. You know, that's definitely one obstacle I've run into. You said something I say all the time, unapologetically Black. Y'all gonna get this work. That's what it's going. I would be otherwise.
Sorry, but I'm not sorry.
Exactly. Every spin is gonna have that spin on it. Whatever I'm doing is gonna have that spin on it. So you talked about medicine. Talk about TrapMedicine, brother. What is TrapMedicine?
Yeah, so when I was, living in Oakland, I grew up in the barbershop. We all Black men, we grew up in the barbershop. And the barbershop to me always represented a space of peace. Mm-hmm. And it was a place where I could just be myself. And you go there, you talk about like LeBron versus Jordan, or you talk about relationships, spirituality, you talk about politics. There's so many things that we touch on in the barbershop that honestly, like we should be getting paid for that. That's education that's not being like funded through the state, that I think is very critical to the development of black boys, but also Black men. And it was one time I was in this barbershop in Berkeley at Harold's. Harold is right across the street from Ashby Park. It's like a small barbershop. And it was like 3 young men, they were probably like 14, 15, and they were talking about like sex and relationship, these girls they were talking to. And Harold like stopped what he was doing. He was like shaving this old guy. Dude was like leaned back in the chair, bald guy, just getting the shave or whatever. He stopped what he did. He put his razor down. He took out a latex glove, cut it up a little bit, and like stretched it out. I still got the picture. I could share it with you. But basically, Harold was like, "Yo, how many of y'all actually know like how to use a condom, or like what's the purpose of a condom, or like, if y'all doing all this stuff with these girls, like y'all should be like educated on like what safe sex looks like, and like what's birth control, like all these different things that we don't generally have conversations with our young men about, because either like we don't know, or we feel uncomfortable bringing it up, or like you don't want to look corny bringing it up. But like he was just like, yo, let's talk about it. So we literally had a conversation in the barbershop about sex. And to me, it was like, there were education points there that he made some very great points. But obviously, like he's not a scientist, he's not a doctor. So like some of the stuff obviously wasn't as accurate as you might want to have it be. But I saw like the potential for the barbershop being a space where we have these conversations in the community, in a communal setting. And, as somebody who may feel, you have a cross section of people in the barbershop. You have your older gentlemen, you have your young guys. Some people are very vocal and are willing to share their opinions. Other people are not as vocal and may not necessarily ask. But in those settings where it's like an open space and it's safe, like more than likely you're gonna get people who are willing to have like a conversation, or willing to ask questions that they may not necessarily have a lot of information on. And so I was like, this is the perfect way for us to get information out about everything from mental health, sexual health, chronic illness, whether it's hypertension or diabetes. We could talk about prostate cancer. That's something that is very prevalent among Black men that we don't talk about, particularly as, because it can be a sensitive subject for a lot of men, particularly men who might have erectile dysfunction, or who have to wear like a certain, like a diaper or whatever, because they, are pissing on themselves. And so it's sensitive. So I feel like the barbershop was a place where you could have structured conversations, but also structure in a way where it meets people where they are, and in a space that's like historically been significant for our communities. And so TrapMedicine kind of represents, it's trying to systematize that model. So trying to bring services into barbershops, conversations in the barbershops that necessarily wouldn't happen otherwise, and trying to leverage sort of the culture, the relationships, and the spirit of community in a way that's going to promote wellness among Black men. And so what we've been doing recently has been, we've been doing like, everybody's talking about COVID, right? And so we've been doing like testing and vaccinations, but we're also having conversations with men in the shop around like, what are some of the hesitancies around the vaccine, or what are the hesitancies around medicine and healthcare in general, right? So a lot of what we know about the hesitancy that we see now is connected to history and connected to abuse and the legacy of exploitation. And research has done a horrible job of engaging us because they've been only used us as subjects. Right. You know what I mean? And in some ways, in very abusive ways. And so we have those conversations in the shop around the history of medicine and the history of abuse among researchers. And we also try to like let people know like there are now safeguards in place due to that history that are going to prevent, well, hopefully we want them to prevent those things from happening again. And so we're trying to get people to feel more open to one, participating in research. And it doesn't have to necessarily be you giving your saliva or your blood. It could be just you participating in a focus group, or you being interviewed one-on-one, but getting people to be more open to participating in research, because the truth of the matter is, if we're not at the table, we're on the plate, right? And so these things are being developed for us that don't include our voices and don't include, a lot of Black people are not included in a lot of these studies. And so a lot of the therapeutics, the technologies, the interventions around public health, all these things are often being developed without our participation. And to me, the reason why TrapMedicine seems so novel is for that very reasons, because if they had listened to us years ago when these interventions started, we'd have a barbershop clinic, a litany of barbershop, hair salon, church clinics all over the place that could serve our people in a way that we want to be served. But because we haven't necessarily been at the table and that data has not been collected to be able to show, like, listen, like this is a really effective model, that's not going to be in policy. It's not going to be in the resource redistribution. It's not going to be part of anybody's policy platform. And we have to be able to be at the table in order for those things to change. And so TrapMedicine kind of represents that. And it's also just a passion project of mine. Like, being a medical student, I'm spend most of my time just studying. And sometimes I just want to take a step back and just remind myself of why I'm doing this. And TrapMedicine is a daily reminder of like, I'm doing this for my folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm doing this for my aunties, my uncles, my cousins, my friends, my coaches. And so for me, it's like a personal passion project, but in general, it's really about trying to build a healthcare system for Black men that leverages the things that we already do. We just get our hair cut. We want to look fly. We want to, feel good. And so I figure, why not leverage that and try to combine both culture and health to be able to promote that.
I'm so glad you're speaking on that, particularly when it comes to the health field in Black men, because there is that apprehension. I've thrown events where we've had screenings for HIV, cancer, and brothers, they like, nah, I'm not even gonna deal with it. In a lot of cases, they self-medicate. Brother been dealing with abdominal pain for months, but he's taking Hennessy shots to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad to see how would barbershops, if they were one to get involved and have TrapMedicine be brought to their barbershop, how would they go about that?
Man, we are open and looking for additional partners right now across the state. So we're definitely, obviously, have a presence here in Los Angeles and are looking to grow and to do some more stuff in like the Sacramento area, where we know a lot of Black people are moving, but also in Oakland and the Bay. So they can definitely reach out to myself. They can look up some of the work that we were doing, so they can kind of get some familiarity with like our model. But we also we want to meet barbershops where they are, because not every barbershop is the same. And so we try to offer like a menu of options, so they can have us come and we can do trainings for the barbers, or we just talk to the barbers and have like different topics where we go over hypertension and what that is and how you talk to your clients about that, or HIV prevention and sort of what are some of the ways that men and women can prevent themselves from contracting HIV. So we do like trainings. There's also like we have a model where we can come on site. We have a mobile clinic now in partnership with Charles Drew University, where we can come on site and provide physical examinations. We can do blood pressure screenings. We can do HIV testing, COVID testing, vaccinations, all of that stuff. And then we could also just create like pamphlets and sort of like educational material that they could just put in the shop. And so we try to make it flexible enough, because we know not every shop is necessarily going to be ready and willing to have us in the shop having conversations with their clients. Mm-hmm. We understand we got to build trust. So TRAP, I should take a step back, but TRAP is an acronym for Trust, Research, Access, Prevention. Trust being the most important thing that you can have when it comes to somebody's health. If you don't have that, if there's no belief in whatever I'm doing is going to actually benefit me, or if I don't trust you, then that relationship is fractured. And so we try to make sure that that's something that we come into the barbershops knowing that like we have to build trust before we come in there talking about anything, right? And so that's something that I'm very like passionate about, is like not coming in telling barbershops what we're going to do, but asking them, what are the things that some of your clients come in to you and talk to you about, or what are you aware of that they might be dealing with? It might be relationship stuff, it might be drugs, it might be some gang related violence, it might be a whole bunch of different things that don't necessarily have to do with like health. The things that we think about is like health, but we can always connect those things to health, because if it's a threat to our person and our mind and our body, our spirit, then it has to do with our health. And so we try to connect it in that way. And oftentimes what I tell barbers is like, your bottom line is you got to have a chair and you got to have a body in your chair, right? In order for you to make $1, you got to have somebody in this chair. And unfortunately, like Black men, we have the shortest life expectancy. So out of all of your clients, you're more likely your Black male clients are more at risk than any of your other clients, right? And so in order to continue to thrive as a barber, you want to have your clients be healthy and alive.
That's real.
And so like, I try to just bring it to that level, because, some people are like, I don't know, we just a barbershop, man. We just want to cut hair. But always try to remind them of just like the greater goal and the greater purpose. And so they can always, we're on social media platforms, so they can follow us on Instagram is TrapMedicine, Facebook is TrapMedicine, and then email is just TrapMedicine@gmail. And we'll be willing to just kind of like walk them through what it might look like. There's no cost to them. We take care of everything. We have a whole team that comes out and sets it up. And so it's just a matter of us just using the space.
I definitely got a space for you in Oakland whenever you're ready, brother. The hair mechanics. I'm actually gonna have that brother on here as a guest, because one thing I'm trying to push there at my barbershop, his barbershop rather, is mental health.
Yes.
That's another taboo. I ain't crazy, brother. It ain't about being crazy.
It ain't even about that.
Mental health is just like any other part of your health. So that's something I've been pushing, because indirectly, barbers are therapists, bro. Like barbers hear it all. What's going on at the brother house, what's going on at his job. They're therapists indirectly. And some of them, like you said earlier, are more equipped than others in dealing with it. But I'm like, it would benefit you even more if you had someone that was just kind of like a residency almost, that came in maybe a certain time in the month or whatever, and could at least be resources and give them, outlets where they can go get this up. Because you already know, bro, sitting in the barbershop for an hour, you hear some of everything.
Everything.
Who just got shot, who just got robbed. Like it's interesting. And
getting cheated on.
Man, it's the storehouse for everything, basically.
Yes.
But explain your path towards medicine. What was your path towards getting into medicine, brother?
Yeah. So I took a circuitous path into medicine. Most people they'll go to undergrad and get their bachelor's degree, spend 4 years doing that, and then will go directly into medicine, or they'll maybe do like an internship or something and then go into medicine. I didn't even know that I was even interested in medicine, honestly, until I was well into my 30s. Mm-hmm. So, and I'd say that because I think a lot of people will write themselves off at 30 and not take chances and risks and think that, man, it's over for me. I got kids, or I got a career already. I don't want to step away. I'm making money. But you know, at the end of the day, you got to bet on yourself, and also you got to prioritize your own happiness and joy. And so for me, when I was working in urban planning right after college, right after Morehouse, I moved up to New York City and was working in urban planning for a while. And if you know anything, just anything about planning, redevelopment, revitalization, is all about the money. It has nothing to do with the people. It has nothing to do about preserving the character or the history of these neighborhoods. It's about how can we bring how can we attract people who have higher income? How can we attract businesses that can provide tax revenue? How can we redevelop this area to make it more attractive for investment? And I got tired of that. Like after a few years of doing that, you know, it didn't feel right. I was also the only Black person doing planning at the time, at least in my department. And I was working in New York City, so the biggest city in the country, and you very rarely see any Black urban planners, right? So I knew that their priority wasn't equity. The priority wasn't like trying to go into communities like Harlem and South Bronx and Flatbush, Bushwick, these areas that we know are predominantly Black and brown and are poor. It wasn't about going in there and helping like develop those communities or like provide opportunities for those people to continue to thrive and to contribute to the growth of those communities. It was actually about moving those people out as soon as possible and trying to get in, you know, for the person who could come in with the most income and the highest bid on real estate. And so it drove me to look more specifically at public health, because I knew that public health was a cool pivot from urban planning, where I could still focus on the built environment, but also have more of a focus on the people and the impact of the built environment on like our physical and mental health. So I ended up leaving New York City, going to graduate school, studying social policy and planning with a focus on public health, where I looked at like the riots in the 60s that happened here in the US, like in Newark, St. Louis, Detroit. Looked at the riots there and then look at the sort of public health factors that contributed to the riots, and then compared that to also the Black riots that happened in England, in the UK in the 80s. And a lot of people don't talk about and know about, where Black people had the same issues that they were dealing with in the US, and, you know, lack of quality housing, schools were terrible, living in poverty, police brutality, all those things that we know happen in this country, same thing that happened all across the globe. And it just kind of showed me the diaspora is connected in a way that we don't even really acknowledge sometimes. And there's so much power in those shared experiences. But got that opportunity to study there and was like, yo, I really want to do some work in public health. Like, I know that this is something I want to do. And so I ended up coming back to Oakland, and that's when I was working for Youth Uprising. I got an opportunity to work with YU, doing some like community organizing work, violence prevention related work, and got introduced to like the school-based clinic model, and started working in a school-based clinic at James Logan High School and at in Union City, and then at Tennyson in Hayward, and ran those two clinics for almost 3 years. And just working in those clinics, working with young people, developing like youth-led health campaigns. You know, we did like haunted house in the clinic where we taught about STIs and HIV. Like, I love working with young people. They are the most brilliant geniuses that I have ever worked with. Like, I don't think I've worked with a lot of PhDs and MDs and everybody, they got all kind of letters behind their name. But the most brilliant people I've ever worked with are young Black and brown youth. And they're the most creative, bro. And they really were the ones that kind of like were the catalyst for me to pursue medicine, honestly. And that sort of has helped me to think about like what within medicine I want to do. So I'm really interested in child and adolescent psychiatry, and as well as adult psychiatry. I'm really interested in mental health. I think it's one of the things that we have to, as a community, have better solutions for and therapeutics for, and not just medicate people, or not just like throw people in jail or like 5150 them and they be at John George. We got to help create better mechanisms for addressing mental health, and it has to be preventive, right? And so not just like when things go wrong, but before things go wrong, what can we be doing on a day-to-day basis, you know, to help support our mental health and support our mental wellness? Because there's genius that oftentimes gets thwarted by the stuff that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? The structural racism, housing instability, cost of living, bills, like stress, just those things take a toll on our innate genius. And so there's a lot of untapped potential in our communities because we all dealing with a number of different things. And so I think mental health is at the core of that. And so I ended up working with that clinic. I was like, man, I knew I had to take the prereqs to get into medical school. So I went to Laney and Merritt to take like the general biology, general chemistry and stuff like that. And in some of the conversations I was having with people and I, telling them I wanted to go to medical school, they were like, you really got to do this at a 4-year because they want to be able to see that you can handle the rigor. So I was like, all right, bet I'll apply to a post-bac program. And for post-bac programs, those are generally designed specifically for people who are either like changing careers and haven't taken any science courses. So they just provide you with just the science courses that you need to get into medical school, or for people who have like low GPAs and want to get into medical school. So I was like the career changer. So I came in, I got into the post-bac program at Drew, spent a year there, did research in HIV and mental health, took all the core courses that I needed to take, continued doing work around TrapMedicine and barbershops here in LA, and just applied to like 20 schools. And the Drew UCLA program accepted me. And so I was like, this is home. They're the first school that gave me an opportunity. It felt like home, but also like their mission and the history around Drew connected with my history and mission. And so, so I'm here in my second year in the Drew UCLA program. And Drew has such a rich history. They started from the Watts riots. And so for me, it felt like a full circle moment, you know what I mean? Having studied the riots and now being at a school that kind of came out of that.
So I'm gonna celebrate you. You recently were a recipient of a very prestigious award as well. I saw on Dr. Oz's show. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh man, it's crazy. I got awarded a scholarship, man, just for doing the work, you know what I'm saying? And it's always good to always feels good to be recognized, not to be validated, but to be recognized by other people, particularly with, financial resources, because we all could use it. Right. But that was something that was a big accomplishment because it helped affirm. Sometimes, you go through this process. This is a very tough process and you go through it and you don't know, you know what I'm saying? You just kind of like are going through it and you just like, I'm hoping I'm doing the right thing. I'm hoping that I'm making the right choices. But when you get awarded those things and other people see something in you that you may not necessarily always see, it's always good to just reflect on like, okay, cool. Like the stuff that I prayed for is happening. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I was awarded a $10,000 scholarship. And it was basically a scholarship to get more, trying to, support the pipeline of Black people going into medicine for the most part. And Dr. Oz has been doing a lot of work around just trying to diversify medicine over the last few years. And I applied for it just like randomly. I was just like, we'll see if I get it. Cool. If I don't, cool. Ended up getting it. It's crazy because I still get messages from people now that like, I guess it's been re-airing recently.
Right.
I've been getting messages from folks just like congratulating me and just telling me like, I'm so inspired by your story and just like keep up the good work. And it always feels good, man. I'm sitting here studying stuff and I see a message of, somebody that's a pre-med that's like, yo, I just need a little bit of advice. Like I just saw your story on Dr. Oz, or I just read an article about you. And I'm always willing and open to like have those conversations and to provide mentorship because that's what helped me.
So going back to mental health, and I ask all the guests this question, with all of this that you're juggling, all of this that you're dealing with, how do you practice self-care?
Man.
What does that look like for
always? Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's every day is a new day. So I just take it. The first thing I do is I take it day by day. I try not to look too far ahead and also try to not look too far behind me, right? Because they say if you look behind you, it leads to depression. You look too much ahead of you, it contributes to anxiety. So I try to stay in the present as much as I can. Obviously, that's a skill and a practice. You literally have to practice that every day. So I try to practice being present by doing like a morning meditation. And I take walks in my neighborhood every morning. I live in Baldwin Hills, Crenshaw area, so it's like all Black, all brown. So it's great to just wake up in the morning and just see, some of the elders walking with their wives, and it feels good. That's the first thing in my morning I want to see. Is just like, all right, I feel good. I'm up, before the sun is up, and I pray. You know what I'm saying? Like I meditate and I pray in the morning. I think those are the most important things that help get my day started. Also spend time with people that don't drain my energy. So I try to spend time with people who are uplifting, who also have a similar mindset, who have similar values, and who understand like the importance of this work, not just being like Black and brown doctors, but of like being in community with each other, being honest, being transparent, being open, being vulnerable. Like when you feel safe around the people that you're around, it also contributes to like you being mentally well. And I also like I read. So I read this book every morning. It's basically like affirmations. It's by Ernest Holmes. It's called 365 Science of Mind. It's just like daily affirmations that are both spiritual but also like mental wellness related. And like that is something that I just kind of like reflect on every day. And then outside of that, man, I rest, I sleep. You know what I'm saying? Like I literally, I go to bed at 10, I get up at 4. I try to get at least 6 hours of sleep. And some people will be like, that's not enough. But for me, everybody's different. For me, 6 hours is enough sleep for me. I'm pretty functional with 6 hours of sleep. And then I do things that I love, man. I hoop, I draw a little bit. I like to, I have my dog. So I was playing with my dog, and I just love to just be active and doing things that that aren't necessarily academic all the time. Like I just like to just take a step back and just kind of continue to appreciate life and living, because we sometimes we take those things for granted, and I think every moment is a gift. And so I try to live that way. Whereas like even this moment that we have right now, right? Like we will never be able to create this moment ever again. And so it's a gift because anything can happen at any moment. And so I just try to show gratitude. I have a gratitude journal that I write in, and then I just listen to a lot of different music. From right now, I've been listening to a lot of Gunna. But Gunna, I got some gospel, I got some alternative music, all kind of different music that I listen to.
All about balance, brother.
Yeah. That's it.
What message do you have for that 10-year-old Black child in West or East Oakland right now that may hear this interview or watch this interview? What message do you have for them where they're just kind of wondering, is there better? What message do you have for them?
I say to them, it first starts with yourself. So, how we move through the world, I'll say to them, like, it really depends on what you think about yourself. And the world is going to give you all kind of different messages about who you are. But at the end of the day, you have to know who you are, and know whose you are and where you come from. And so, to the 10-year-old, I always tell them to just read stuff that's at your level, you know what I mean? As you continue to grow, continue to educate yourself on your people in a way that, and from people who are going to tell the truth, are not going to give you lies, right? And then I will also say, to them, everything, it will be well, and I think it'll be well because you're here, and because you are alive, you have an opportunity every day to change the world, and in order to do that, you got to change yourself. And so a lot of that work has to be done internally, also, like, you 10 years old, build friendships, create relationships with people that are going to be long lasting. I got friends that I'm still friends with from 10 years old. And those are the people that I go to when in my hardest times, I'm calling them, you know what I mean? And those are the friendships that I think have tremendous impact on who we are. The other thing I would tell them is don't always believe what you think. There's some things that we think that come into our minds and pop into our minds that aren't always serving us. And we tend to, sometimes we believe those things and then we cycle into those like believing the negative things about us or the bad things about us that have been fed to us from the media, from our peers, from our parents, our family. You don't have to believe everything you think, but choose the things that you think, right? And so like, it's about like being very intentional about like where you direct your attention, right? And so like as a 10-year-old, I know 10-year-olds are on social media all the time. Some of that stuff, like you don't really necessarily need to consume. Right. Just be a child, like go play some video games, go outside and go play, you know, just like hone the innate child in you. I think that I would tell that to an adult too. You know, sometimes as we get older, we go away from the things that brought us joy and brought us happiness. And so, and I'm in the process of doing that myself, of just getting back to the things that I love to do as a child. And so that 10-year-old boy, I would tell them like, you know, don't necessarily believe everything that you think. Some things are good and some things are bad. Keep good people around you. Read as much as you can, you know, the things that give you, it don't have to necessarily be history. It could be sci-fi, fantasy, just create things that are going to broaden your imagination beyond what you see, you know what I mean? And then I'll always say, just like have some type of spiritual practice. I don't care who you pray to, it don't matter to me. And just as long as you understand that there's a source that you pull from and that's guiding you and that's there to support you, you'll be all right.
Absolutely. Well, Brother Jahmil, proud ain't big enough of a word, as cliche as that sound. Man, everything that I'm seeing you do, to see your growth, there is no limit to what you're doing, and just your impact being felt now and being on this platform and other platforms that you've been on. Man, I thank you. That's what I basically can say in general.
Man, I thank you, man. You the one that you're out here inspiring all of us, bro, honestly. And so just thank you. I appreciate the work that you do, even when it's unrecognized and unappreciated, and oftentimes unfunded.
Say that.
Still out here doing the work, you know what I mean? And that's what it's about. And you haven't wavered from that ever since I met you. You haven't wavered from that. And so I really appreciate you for creating this platform and for inviting me on to just kind of talk and chat.
And I appreciate that. Full circle. My thing, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Alchemist, so my 10-year-olds, that's a book you definitely need to read. My confirmations have always been that I run into people kind of full circle. That's always been my personal confirmation. When I come back in contact with folks like you who saw this in the beginning, I didn't have a foundation when you first met me.
Yeah,
I was talking about it. Brother,
yeah.
this is what I want to do 10 years from now, brother. This is what I want to kind of set to do. And it hasn't been an easy path, but I mean, sticking to it, but that's the Oakland in us.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. But before you go, brother, if you could do me one last favor, if you could say, this is Brother Jahmil, and you're watching the Pachyderm Podcast. This is Brother Jahmil, and you are watching the Pachyderm Podcast. Appreciate you, good brother. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And continue. And I'm going to definitely link you with these brothers at the Hair Mechanics. I'm going to definitely connect y'all, because he's already open to what I'm trying to do with the mental health piece. And just he's a good brother just in general. And that's really the angle I've been pushing with them, is like, man, I literally, out of the stories in there, it's always about, you know, he right on International and 85th. Oh yeah, I know. It's out there, brother. It's just like the conversation gonna be about who got popped, who got robbed, who got arrested. That's just always the conversation. Yep. And so that's what we need to be, brother. We all grew up there, and that's where I grew up. And the thing for me that I have to really just balance sometimes is hard is I can't name 10 brothers that I grew up with that ain't dead or in jail now. Yeah, man. Like most of my friends are dead or in jail. Yep. And I grew up in my generation right on that block. Yep. So I try to, especially holler at the youngsters. I get it. I would hate to be a teen today in 2021. Yeah. Not saying that it was smooth when I was a teenager, but now at least I had the OG that would pull us to the side. Yeah. It was the D-boys that was threatening to kick our ass if they saw us out there doing it. Now it's just the opposite. They actually, it pains me when I read about these shootings, and now just by habit, I immediately go to the ages. Mm-hmm. It's like 29, 32, and then a 16-year-old. I'm like, how does that even happen? That didn't happen in my era. Yeah. We couldn't hang around them. Exactly. We wasn't gang goofy. We knew exactly what these cats was doing, but they didn't even allow us to be around them. Yeah. Like straight up. Like they be looking at us like, go ahead. Ain't no code. No, not at all. And that's the part that's so disheartening right now that I'm talking to teens and younger of now having discussions about what colors they want at their funerals and what songs they want to play. That's why I was saying about with that question about is there better? They honestly just don't feel like that's natural for me to be gone at 17. So let me let y'all know right now what I want in my funeral.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't even want to embrace that conversation, brother. I'm big on energy, certain kind of energies. I don't even stop. I don't even want to have this conversation with you. Right? So,
because if you can see it, if you can see it, you can achieve it. And that goes for good and bad.
I tell them the universe is powerful, brother. What you think, the universe go, all right, bet.
Yep, exactly.
F my life, okay, bet. All right, I'm gonna show you. So words are powerful, thoughts are powerful, but like I said, coming back full circle, brother, I'm so proud of you on so many levels, and I thank you for taking time out of what I know is your busy schedule.
For sure, man. I thank you, and I appreciate you, and